Welcome to our first Creative iMedia lesson for designing and developing digital games. In this session, we'll explore the process of creating a game, looking at the main types and characteristics in today's gaming industry. There are two main things I'd like you to be able to do by the end of today. Firstly, to know the main types of digital game and their key characteristics. Secondly, it's to identify games which are popular with particular target audience groups. You're going to be using both of these things to build on your knowledge and also to help you to develop your own games. The keywords that you can see on screen relate to today's lesson. Over the coming weeks, we'll be adding to these key terms, and these are the technical terms that you will be expected to use in your assignments and later in your coursework and also in the exam. Pause the video and make a note of these. Creating a computer game is an intricate and multi-layered process that requires a lot of planning, hard work and collaboration. Typically, the game development lifecycle follows a plan, develop and test methodology. The planning phase is the first step in creating a game. During this stage, the game designers and developers mind map ideas and identify the key components of the game, such as the story, the characters, the game mechanics, and the user interface. Once all of these elements are identified, the team will then create a detailed plan that outlines the game's features, the resources needed, and also the timeline for development. The development phase begins once the plan is in place. Although this plan may change and developers often need to be able to adapt to these changes. This stage involves coding, designing and creating the various elements of the game. The development team works closely together and often with games testers to ensure that the finished product is what was originally planned. Once the development phase is complete, the game moves into the testing phase. Now, this doesn't mean that the game wasn't tested along the way, but instead this is a more formal testing stage. During this stage, the game is tested for bugs, glitches and other issues. The testing team plays the game extensively, making sure that everything works as it should and that the game is fun and engaging for the user. Sometimes this also includes an early release of the game for general players who also give feedback. After the testing phase is complete, the game is ready for release. The final product is reviewed, packaged and marketed to the public. And over the next half term, you'll be learning how to design your own game using careful planning, development and testing. In the world of digital games, resources are crucial elements that help players progress through the game. These resources can be divided into two categories. That's primary and secondary resources. In the previous unit and in this unit, we'll often refer to these as assets. Primary resources are the resources or assets that you as the designer have created yourself. It's likely that you've drawn inspiration from somewhere when creating an asset, but you can't create this as a copy or it to be a derived work of somebody else. Secondary resources, on the other hand, are resources that somebody else has created and has given you permission to use. This may be because they gave you direct permission or they've released these under a Creative Commons license. Both primary and secondary resources play a vital role in digital games. Where your primary resources make the game unique to you, the secondary resources can speed up the development process, and you'll be using a combination of these in your games. As you use them, make sure that you add every resource and asset into your assets table and make a really clear note of whether they are primary or secondary. Our final task for this week is to look at the different characteristics of a variety of different games. So we're going to start off with 2D arcade games. Now, in 2D arcade games, you can see here that the graphics are flat. We have sprites which are placed onto a screen, and our screen can be divided really clearly into X and Y coordinates. Now, X and Y, remember from maths, X is along the corridor and Y is up the stairs. Now, in our case, it's actually probably along the corridor and down the stairs. Now, in this one that you can see in front of you here, we've got Stardew Valley. We've got an interface that uses flat menus. We have graphics which appear sort of 3D, but actually they're flat on the screen. And as our player is moving around, the screen is scrolling with them. So they're not able to play in the first person. Now, the first person simply means that you are seeing the world as if you are looking out of the eyes of the sprite. Well, we're not here. We're actually in the third person. So we are controlling the player at the bottom there. But rather than controlling the player by physically moving ourselves around, we are controlling them by moving them around the screen that we can see. Now, the X and Y coordinates are going to be different for each game, and as we start to create our game in Game Maker, what we will be doing is we will be looking at the number of pixels that you want to have on those screens, so the number of X versus Y. So, looking at 2D arcade games, we're talking about flat graphics, simple X and Y coordinates, and using a flat menu. It certainly doesn't mean that the game itself is simple. It just means that the style and the visuals of the game look like they could be on an old arcade machine. So a 3D RPG is next. And here you can see we have our 3D RPG, and RPG stands for role-playing game. Now, a role-playing game doesn't necessarily have to be role-playing of high fantasy. It is simply you are playing as the character, and you are often moving around as if you are them. So in this case, our role-playing game is using a 3D environment. That simply means that we are using an X, Y, and Z coordinate. Now, what happens here is that the X, Y, and Z coordinates, they are on a plane. Now, what that means is essentially you have a floor in front of you, and the floor goes forward and back on your Y coordinate, side to side on the X, and then up and down on Z. So quite often, especially if you're playing like this with Minecraft, you can actually press F3, have a look at your current coordinates, and you can actually see what your X, Y, and Z coordinates are in the world that you're playing in. Now, the graphics in this one will appear to be 3D because they have been designed as 3D objects. So if you are going to create a 3D game, you do also need to be able to create 3D objects. So for this one, the user can play in the first person or in the third person, but it's much more likely you're going to be playing in the first person. Now, next comes our MMO or MMORPG. MMORPG stands for Massively Multiplayer Online Role-Playing Game. That is quite the mouthful, and it's also why we reduce it down to just an acronym. Now, an MMORPG, that can be either 2D or 3D, and always includes other players. Now, this means that you could be playing a 3D game like World of Warcraft here, and that's going to include players that you have never met. These are other people online. And this is often where we bring in things like online safety when you are playing games. Now, there are possibilities for you to play with people that you do actually know, and that means that you can create a private instance. Now, that private instance could potentially mean that you are playing on a private server, or you are playing on the main servers, but you have blocked yourself off from other people. It very much depends upon the game. That doesn't mean that it's no longer an MMO. MMO, simply massively multiplayer online game. In this case, you can also have things like PvP, person versus person, or player versus player. That means that you have combat directly with other people. Not everybody enjoys that kind of game. Sometimes you can actually go to places where that is switched off specifically so you can have a more gentle experience. But the whole point of MMOs are to be able to interact with other people. In this case, you can see our player is not interacting with other people, but they are able to see a chat on the left-hand side. Those have different colour codings, so you can see a general chat in white and a guild chat with their friends in green. Simulations are a little bit different, and you can see here we have Forza, which is a simulation driving game where we are playing in the third person. Now this is interesting because simulations are almost never in the third person. They are almost always first person because they are simulating how the person is interacting either with the real world or as a first person interaction. So what we are looking to do here is, in this case, we are mimicking a fantasy event, or we are mimicking a driving or a sport event, and you are able to take control of either the car, the player, or it could well be a simulation of, say, flying in space. Now that is possibly, in our case, not the real world, but it would be a first-person interaction. So for simulation games, they're not always going to be a game. Sometimes they're going to be there for training, especially when you are taking a simulation and you are bringing that into something like virtual reality. Lots of simulations have now been used for training pilots, training drivers, training doctors as well, so they can actually see a potential, like an internal organ, and they can see this in 3D without having to potentially cause issue to life. Imagine driving like this person is right now, and you were doing that in real life. It's probably not that safe. So this simulation allows us to practice, but also allows us to have some fun whilst doing so. So characteristics of simulation games: not always a game, but is always a simulation or mimicking the real world and giving us a first-person interaction. Now, something that you might be quite familiar with is game-based learning or game simulation. Here, game-based learning could be 2D or 3D, and the idea of game-based learning is that it's going to use the game to teach you either a subject or a skill. Now, in the case of Code Combat, they are teaching Python, and this person here is off to create some Python code and defeat various ogres. And each stage, you can see there, you're able to choose a language, and by choosing that language you can then go in and perform a level, learnt a skill in this case, and then move on. So the idea of this is that the user is learning a skill or topic, they solve a puzzle, potentially even unlock the next level by solving a task, and by showing what they've learnt, they're then progressing through the game. So you can see in this case we have a level which is going to teach some movements. So you have to grab the treasure here, so it looks like it's a puzzle, but in actual fact, instead of moving the character around the board, they have to type in the code that will actually solve the puzzle. So here we have a hero.moveRight. Now this is an interesting one because it's actually quite an advanced Python command, but it's one of the very, very first things that you learn in this particular game. So in Code Combat, you need to be able to move your object or your sprite, and that sprite is known as hero. So you can have move down, you can have move right, you can have move left, but you probably want to avoid the spikes. So they click done. Their code is then checked, and rather than saying that your code is correct, you are given the task of saying you have reached victory, you've been given gems, you've been given XP, so it feels very much like a game. This is also known as the gamification of learning. Now our last two are looking at virtual reality and augmented reality. Now, firstly, we're going to look at virtual reality. Now, I want you to imagine that you are wearing a large VR headset, because virtual reality games require extra hardware needed to actually see what's going on. In this case, where you can see the hands, those are your controllers, so you do need extra hardware to also interact. So our player is going to use hardware to place this player inside a simulation. The screen itself is also going to use X, Y, and Z coordinates because we're in a 3D environment. And also our player is going to be moving around what feels reasonably realistically, although we appear to be firing staples at people, so maybe not that realistic. So in this case, what we are doing is we are moving our hands around, we're moving our head every time that screen moves. That is because the player is using their headset to move around the screen. By doing this, you are able to create a more engaging game. You're able to create something which keeps the user there. Think about what you've been asked to do for task 1 here. And in this case, by stepping up the difficulty each time you perform a task, you're able to keep that user wanting to use this particular hardware. We know at this stage that VR hardware is incredibly expensive, even though it's a technology that's been around for some time now. And in order for them to invest in that extra hardware, the games that we produce need to allow us to feel like we're actually in the game. Now, this one doesn't use particularly good graphics. However, it is a very engaging game because it teaches you actually how to use your headset. And finally, we have augmented reality. Now, augmented reality is very similar to virtual reality, but the difference is that our augmented reality is seeing extra objects placed around the real world. Now, this person is wearing a headset which actually has a camera built in, so they can see the world in front of them, but they are now placing themselves in a 3D Mario environment. So they're playing what would normally be a Mario game, where you would see this as a 2D arcade game, but they've created this as a 3D environment which is then placed over the top of the real world. Now, of course, these people who are walking their dogs, they can't see everything that this other person can see, so they might look a little unusual. In this case, we are allowing the user to potentially control movements and control a world view. You might be able to do this using a phone. Now, I've shown you something which is quite an unusual project, and this is not a game that was actually released. This was a student project for a university game. However, the things that you might be more familiar with are things like Pokemon Go. You can play Pokemon Go on your phone and you look around the real world and you see the Pokemons actually placed around the world that you are moving around in. So augmented reality is very, very similar to VR, but players can see the real world through a camera or a lens. Now, at the end of today's lesson, I'm going to ask you to perform an augmented reality task, and this is going to be on the final tab at the end of this week's lessons. So you can see here that the person is actually using their hands to send out little targets. Now, they are wearing white gloves, and I think that's more for effect than anything else. You don't have to be wearing white gloves. It was looking for a particular hand signal. In this case, they're actually dressed up like Mario, so I think that was more for the video than anything else. You certainly don't have to be dressed as Mario to play this game. You can see the full video using the link at the top, and I will also put this underneath.